welcome back to the Elephant Lounge. I'm your host, Tuesday. I want to thank you for joining me. Welcome to Leaving Neverland number 7 in this series. I thought I'd take the opportunity to respond to some of the feedback that I've received. Of course, a lot of it's been negative. I expected that. Michael Jackson fans are notorious for swarming in on anything that doesn't confirm their bias. I did, however, manage to find one post that was rather long, written in fairly good English, not just one paragraph. The one paragraph novels are rather impressive. I don't read them because the grammar is so poor. You're welcome to leave them if you like. I do erase threats, however, so that's not accepted here. I will go ahead and get into this one. As I said, it's very long, so if you want to pause and grab something to drink or some popcorn, be my guest. I will be responding to Riley Marson's post. This was on podcast number 5. So now I've listened to the entire video now, and I'm just going to address the things you said that stood out to me the most. This is going to be long. Quote, the documentary is not about MJ, but instead about grooming in general. This means the documentary is not one-sided, unquote. I don't agree with you. The entire documentary is made to try and prove that Michael was a pedophile and a monster manipulator, and it overall revolves around trying to make Michael Jackson look like a monster. The only person responsible for making Michael Jackson look like a monster is himself. The majority of people have already long figured out that Michael Jackson was indeed a pedophile. For the rest of the audience, I think a lot of them had not yet admitted it, but they kind of knew deep down that he was already a pedophile, and this just merely sort of confirmed what they didn't initially want to admit. There are some people out there that just don't want to admit it, no matter how much evidence that they have, no matter how much is in front of them, no matter how obvious it is, they just don't want to admit it. You can't blame the victims for somehow making Michael Jackson look like the monster that he was. He continues, the film did not represent the other side at all. Yes, they may have included clips of Michael defending himself, but in those clips he was defending himself against other accusers. They also let out a magnificent amount of important information surrounding the case, such as the fact that they are suing the estate. Well, suing the estate is symbolic, and that was explained afterwards with the Oprah special. So they did talk about it. It's just not a part of the documentary because the documentary was about grooming. It was about their story, why they protected their abuser, and why they waited so long to come out. So those are the main elements that this documentary was about. As far as defending himself against the other accusers, because it's the same story over and over, and we already know what Michael Jackson and his fans are going to say. We've heard it for 30 years. So there's nothing that they're going to be able to offer that's going to counter what these two men, what their stories are. It's intellectually dishonest to try and equivocate and say that somehow it matters. It doesn't matter. Quote, the side of Michael Jackson's family does not matter because they were not there, unquote. If the side of Michael Jackson's family was let out of the film because they were not there and they therefore don't know what happened, they shouldn't have interviewed Wade and James's families either. This is a double standard because the interviews were only in the film because they're on the side of Wade and James. Au contraire, mon frère. This documentary, as I've said repeatedly, was about grooming, and that grooming process involves the mothers being groomed as well. That's an important element of this story. So yes, of course they're going to be included. Of course they're going to tell their side of the story. And you see that, how enamored they were with Michael Jackson, how they got caught up in this lifestyle and easily manipulated into believing that Michael was this great guy who would never do anything, thereby granting access of their kids to Michael Jackson. Quote, Neverland Firsthand, I'm assuming that's the documentary you were referring to, is one-sided, unquote. First of all, in the beginning of Neverland Firsthand, there's a disclaimer that says this film was not made to degrade victims or devalue their statements, which is true. The film simply challenges the claims of Robson and Safechuck. Okay, well, Leaving Neverland also had a disclaimer as well, saying the Jacksons are denying anything happened. I'll raise you a disclaimer. All right, in Neverland Firsthand, they include interviews with private investigators and professionals. In Leaving Neverland, the only interviews included are of the accusers and their families. Well, the focus on the documentary, again, was about the grooming process, why they protected their abuser for so long, and why it took them so long to come out. It's already 4 hours long. How many more people do you need them to interview? And had you read the trial transcripts and court documents from 2005, you would know their stories. You would know why the prosecution and authorities had always known that these two were victims of Michael Jackson. That's really all you need to know. It was pretty much a consensus before they ever came out. In Neverland Firsthand, they include the footage of the interviewer asking the people being interviewed the questions, something not done in Leaving Neverland, which is suspicious because people are having the idea that Dan Reed was actually telling and coaching Wade and James on how to answer the questions. I'm not taking either side on the matter, but I would love it if they released the unedited versions of the interviews. Whew, that's a mouthful. You're talking about a style. A lot of documentaries show just the person giving their answers. They were mostly just telling their stories. I don't even know if they were being asked specific questions. Probably, likely. That's just a style. Maybe it's something you don't like. That means nothing. And number two, unless you have some type of evidence Dan Reed was coaching them, this is just bizarre inferences made by people who are paranoid or don't want to believe their story, or they're desperate to discredit them in any way they possibly can. It's absurd. So why would you even make that claim unless you had some type of proof that Dan Reed was coaching them? And for what purpose? I mean, they're telling their stories. We know they were victims. The people who choose to be blind at this point, you're choosing to be blind. So if you make that choice, that's fine, but this is not an argument. This is just conspiracy. I will now get out of the way that I am able to give Wade and James the benefit of the doubt when it comes to small inconsistencies like Euro Disney and the bullwhip. Okay, I object to the way that this is worded. These are not small inconsistencies. These are flat out lies. The Euro Disney came from some blog, and I've explained this before. Somebody mislabeled a photo of Michael Jackson and Brett Barnes and put Jimmy Safechuck. Somehow, someone ran with this, decided to extrapolate from this that James had claimed he went to Euro Disney in the documentary. Well, that's not true. I looked everywhere for this claim. There was no mention of Disney whatsoever. The only time James talks about Disney is in his complaint. He says he went to Disney World, and Disney World is in Florida. That's the only time he mentions Disney. This was just a lie. It's not an inconsistency. And the bullwhip, that comes from some YouTuber who has done zero objective analysis of this case. I don't know where he got the claim from because he does not list his source, but as I've posted on my blog, I'll do it again. You can read the document. It confirms that the bullwhip company supplied the movie with 30 bullwhips. There wasn't just one bullwhip. It's an absurd, obnoxious claim. I have no source for it other than I saw it in a certain person's YouTube video. Quote, authorities suspected that Wade and James were being abused by Michael, unquote. By authorities, I'm sure you mean people like Tom Sneeden, people who were against Michael Jackson in the case and who already believed him to be a pedophile in the first place. So they would write every child Michael was frequently around on the list of children he was suspected to have abused. Whew. The authorities that I'm speaking of are the people who worked on the case. The lead detective, Dorwin, the other authorities that had done investigation, all of these people that were involved and put this case together and brought it to Tom Sneeden. Also, the psychiatrist who interviewed both Jordan and Gavin. One of these psychiatrists was top in false allegations. They were both believed. That's how strong this case was. And there was a lot of evidence that wasn't allowed in the 2005 trial. As far as putting these children on a list, there were a list of 5 children who were brought up at Gavin's trial. Police had long suspected they were victims of Michael Jackson. They include Macaulay Culkin, Brett Barnes, Jimmy Safechuck, and Wade Robson, and Jason Francia. Those were the 5. And the reason for James is because there were 2 employees who stated they saw James and Michael Jackson in a compromising position. Same with Wade. The maid had seen Michael Jackson and Wade in a questioning position. It wasn't a direct viewing of things, but Wade's underwear was on the floor, and Michael and him were, I believe, in the shower or in the bath, something like that. The point is, these children were placed on the list because the employees of Michael Jackson had come forward and said, hey, this guy, these kids. That's why. Quote, the inconsistencies are normal and expected. A too perfect story can mean that the person is lying, unquote. While I do agree that not every single date and every single location has to be perfect in order for the story to be believable, there are some major issues with Wade and James' stories and some major inconsistencies, plus a lot of information left out of Leaving Neverland. As I stated earlier, these things aren't exactly speaking for your narrative. Okay, what major inconsistencies? I don't have a reference of what you're talking about. I suppose I can go by the standard handbook of Michael Jackson fans, but I believe later on he gets into some more things. I don't see any major inconsistencies. I think Michael Jackson fans make mountains out of molehills. I think Michael Jackson fans are so thirsty and desperate to discredit James and Wade that they don't take a lot of what they say into consideration. They try to make it sound like everything is mutually exclusive when a lot of times it's not. You can tell your story one way and then later on you might tell it a different way, but it's not inconsistent in the events that they're describing. It may be inconsistent in how they're describing it. Quote, Taj Jackson is the one with the motive to lie, unquote. We will never know for sure whether Taj does get money from the Michael Jackson estate, something he has denied. Okay, well, what's Taj do for a living? How's he make his money? Pull it off of trees or something? I mean, look, if you want to believe he's not getting money from the estate, you'll believe anything, I guess. I mean, I guess that's why you would think Michael Jackson isn't a pedophile, right? But what we do know for sure is that Wade is suing the Michael Jackson estate for over $1 billion, which would be fair if Michael really had abused him, but being at the chance of gaining so much money is also a good motivation to lie, which I have already explained, I believe is completely stupid. It would be very difficult for a grown man with a family to wake up one day and decide he was just going to create some elaborate narrative. He just so happens to have witnesses from back then who testified they saw him in compromising positions with Michael Jackson, including with James Safechuck. He makes this elaborate narrative up, is what we're supposed to believe, and then he has to admit to the world that Gavin didn't see justice because of him, partially because of him and his testimony. Think about how humiliating that is. He went on TV, he went everywhere. He stuck up for Michael Jackson. No, I'm sorry, that is not something someone is just gonna want to come forward and flip their lives all upside down because it's past the statute of limitations. The idea that you believe that someone's gonna risk all this because they may have a chance at getting some money? Come on. It's laughable, especially when it comes to something like this. And we know through the statistics of the FBI and and in the field of psychology, male victims who claim sexual abuse when they're children, they don't lie. There's not any cases that I can reference. I mean, they always leave room in their statistics, like I suppose it's possible. Those cases, any of these false claims, they usually fall apart immediately once they're investigated. The difference with Wade and James is they have this record of being with Michael Jackson. And they have the employees that have confirmed what was going on. You have to be really thick in the head or really dedicated to your belief that you would ignore all of the things that we know about Michael Jackson and call these two liars. Quote, James was asked to testify, unquote. You state that Scott Ross had no idea what he's talking about, but Scott Ross is a very highly thought of private investigator who worked on the Michael Jackson case and was on the defense team of Michael. And he stated in Neverland firsthand that there was never one single thing that made him believe he was on the wrong side of the case back in 2005 trial. I choose to believe that he knows about this more than you do. I find it insulting to my intelligence that this man would definitively say he knows Michael Jackson didn't call James Safechuck and his parents. That is intellectually dishonest. The most he can say is, I never heard about it. Anything's possible. I don't believe it to be true, but I never heard about it. That's about the strongest statement he can make and be honest. For him to jump out and say, no, it never happened, and James Safechuck was a non-entity. Non-entity? How? Again, he was introduced by the prosecution as a potential victim of Michael Jackson. They had a witness. For this guy to go on an interview and make such an absurd, outright claim like that is insulting, number one. Number two, he's going to support Michael Jackson. You realize that, right? This is business 101. Same with Tom Mesereau. Everyone's like, well, he's not getting paid. He's doing this for free. Yeah, he's also getting attention. He's getting notoriety. But no one is going to hire an attorney or a private investigator that once you die, your secrets are going to be let out. No one's going to want to hire you. It is in their best interest to continue to hold on to anything that they may know about Michael Jackson. That's just 101, basic 101. You don't do that. It'd be like if you had a good friend and they told you a bunch of stuff that they may have done or stuff that has happened to them. You know, it's kind of a big deal, right? And they die. Are you going to tell their secrets after they die? No, because your other friends are going to look at you and go, hey, when I die, you're not going to tell on me, are you? They're not going to trust you. No one's going to like you. Of course, they have an interest to continue to lie and continue to support Michael Jackson. He doesn't know. He wasn't with Michael Jackson every minute of the day. Don't act dumb. Quote, Jordy didn't want to take part in the 2005 trial, unquote. I think there's a very specific reason he didn't want to. Well, his life was in danger. Part of the reason for the way the trial went the way it did is because Evan and his family were getting threats. That includes Jordy. And he did want to go to criminal trial. However, he wanted the state to provide him with security. The state couldn't do it. So then he chose to go the civil route so that he could get some money so that he could get the protection. Unfortunately, he ended up signing this settlement that while he gets a whole lot of money, he can't say anything. I think at that point, Evan just wanted to get Jordy out of there and go away and just be done with it, especially around that time. I mean, Michael Jackson was so popular. It'd be a really difficult thing to do. This case was very complicated. It's just not black and white, and it's not easy to understand the actions of the Chandlers because they were so naive and careless. I would recommend reading Diane Diamond's book, which was Be Careful Who You Love. I would recommend reading that book because she does a very objective overview of the Chandlers and what was going on. It's to the point. It gives you an idea of what was going on. It's very objective. You state that Wade didn't understand that it was abuse when he testified back in 2005, just like he claims himself, and that he would never break to an attorney when he didn't tell his family for so many years. You have have to put in consideration that when Wade was a child and defended Michael, he wasn't asked whether Michael had abused him. He was asked if Michael ever touched him. And while Wade does say that he could never tell anyone or admit to the things Michael did to him because Michael had told them they would go to jail if anyone found out, he still didn't understand why people around would think that it was wrong, and therefore most likely would have admitted to some of the things they asked him about if Michael really had done it. I know you will probably attack me for this and say that I know nothing about child sexual abuse, but neither of us are professionals, and this is the way I look at it. Well, that disclaimer that you put there, Riley, tells me you already know how foolish that paragraph sounds. You're trying to play semantics because you are only invested in finding excuses and ways to discredit them. That's all your interest is. You're not interested in truth. You're not interested in looking at the full picture of this case. You're interested in trying to find ways to discredit them. Of course, it's going to be very confusing for Wade, especially as a boy. As he grows older, all of those things are imprinted in his brain. It'd be just like a bad habit that you picked up as a child. Let's say you had a bad habit as a child and you realize that in your 20s, oh wait, I have this bad habit. It might take you another 10 years to get over that, because when that stuff is a part of you as a child, it becomes all that more difficult to get rid of as an adult. It's the same thing here, only, obviously it's a lot more intense because you're dealing with sexual acts. Those sexual acts actually release chemicals in the brain. When those chemicals are released, you have information sent, which forms synapses. Those synapses are created and leave an imprint on the brain. They're very intense when we are young. It's going to be very hard for him to decipher what he was thinking, because now that he's an adult, even when he goes back and looks back at things and what has happened, his perception has already changed. This is why for a lot of us, it's hard for us to remember things that happened in childhood or how we behaved. So the point really here is, of course, Wade is going to be confused about abuse. This idea that they were going to break him at that time by saying, did he touch you or whatever? This is just all semantics. It's very hard for me to take that observation seriously. I think you realize that it's absurd. You state that MJ fans are worried that Wade and James might get their hands on some of Michael's money, but considering their case has already been thrown out of court several times, it seems we really don't have much to worry about. Well, if you don't have much to worry about, then why are you so invested? If you think that they're lying and this is so obvious, then why all these videos from supporters? Why all this desperation to lie about James and Wade? To lie about superfluous things like a bullwhip or Euro Disney, as I mentioned before. Why the desperation? That's my question. You state that Macaulay Culkin has never directly said he didn't molest me, and indeed goes into some long speech about Michael was the victim, etc. Yet he has directly said in an interview, nothing happened. How much more specific can you get? How is that specific? If you learn anything about statement analysis, there are certain ways to deny things that are credible. It's a credible denial. No, I did not eat the chips. Let's say someone accuses you of eating the chips. No, I did not eat the chips. That's a credible denial. Another credible denial is to say, no, that's it. When a person goes on to elaborate, nothing happened. Not really. Michael has a big room, It's like 2 stories, okay? When somebody goes on like that, they're trying to avoid the denial because it's difficult for people to lie. That's why it's not a credible denial. He has never given a credible denial. Anybody trained in law enforcement, anybody who understands statement analysis, you can see he's lying. He's not as good of an actor as he might believe he is. Saying nothing happened is as vague as a person could get. You talk a lot about how MJ fans are completely unable to give Wade and James the benefit of the doubt, and we come up with all kinds of excuses to make Wade and James' story sound unbelievable. Well, to me, it seems a lot like you are unable to give Michael's fans and the people defending him the benefit of the doubt. You say Culkin answers the way he does because Michael groomed him for so many years, which sounds a lot like an excuse to make it sound like Culkin has no idea what he's talking about. No, I'm saying that because he has never given a credible denial. And with him, there are, I believe, 2 Michael Jackson former employees who stated they viewed Michael Jackson and Macaulay Culkin in compromising positions. Do I give the benefit of the doubt to people who support Michael Jackson? I have a very difficult time with Michael Jackson fans because of their dishonesty. They come on Twitter or on other social media, they announce that they've read everything, they've read the court cases, they've done all this research, and yet they bring to me cherry-picked data that had they actually read the trial, they would realize that what they presented was an outright lie. Somebody on Twitter last night, I'm not kidding you, I want to believe it was a troll, but I think this woman, I'm just going to tell you what she said. She said, I remember watching the trial in 1995. Immediately, it was pointed out to her that there was no trial in 1995. She then doubled down on her stupid and said, oh, I meant the 2005 trial. When it was pointed out that the 2005 trial wasn't televised, she tripled down on her stupid and said, I remember seeing some of the trial on TV, and you can find it on the internet. It's not that hard. Head explode. How do people lie like this? Of course, I had to tell her, look, lady, no cameras were allowed in that courtroom. And she doesn't respond. This is what fans do. They do it all the time. And you point out to them where they're wrong. You point out that they haven't told you something that is wrong. You show them documents. You show them all kinds of things. And nothing. They just move on like you didn't say anything. They do not acknowledge facts. And then they repeat this phrase like the little robots that they are, the little NPCs that they are, saying, facts don't lie, people lie. You take your own advice. So no, it's very hard for me to give the benefit of the doubt to people who are so utterly dishonest. Why would you do that? Why would you say such a whopper of a lie all so you can feign some type of authority? It's bizarre. It's narcissistic. It's really weird. You make it sound like Macaulay's word is not to be believed because he keeps saying the same thing, aka his story is consistent. But James and Wade's word is to be believed because they keep changing things up, aka their stories are inconsistent, which goes against all aspects of logic. I need to know specifically, Riley, what you're talking about when you say they're inconsistent. I have not seen anything inconsistent about what they've said. They certainly say things in a different way. Yes, that's happened. They've both admitted that they lied prior because they were protecting their abuser. Yep, but that is consistent with victims who have been groomed by a pedophile. That's actually consistent with a victim's pattern. So you need to tell me what all these things are, because if we really dig into them and really get in deep with any of these supposed inconsistencies, I think you will find that you're just not being the least bit charitable. Someone can describe a situation one way and describe it later in a different way, but they're not mutually mutually exclusive. They're a part of the story. Everybody does that. If there's an event that has happened to you, you will tell it differently each time you say it. Not a lot, but you'll tell it in a different way. They're all true. Everything you've said was true. You might remember an extra detail you didn't remember prior. Happens all the time. That's what I mean by people who are a little bit inconsistent. If you have this perfect story and this perfect answer and you're saying the same thing each and every time, then we might have a little bit of a problem. Somebody who's always got an answer for everything. I'm not saying that that is a lie. I'm saying it's more than likely that it's a lie. That's what I'm saying. It's an indication. There are some people who, if they tell you a story and then they tell it to you a completely different way the next time, yeah, that would be considered a lie as well. We have to tune into what these supposed inconsistencies are, and then we can determine whether they are something that majorly changes the story or that they run together. Now let's talk about hypocrisy. Let's talk about how everyone against Michael, including you, like to talk a lot about how inappropriate it was for a grown man to have sleepovers and share a bed with children. In comes Oprah. She has had sleepover with girls in her schools, but literally no one says anything about them, all because she's a damn woman. And when women are nurturing and caring towards children, everyone sees it as natural and normal. But if it's a man, everyone attacks him and calls his behavior inappropriate. Is it just me, or is there a double standard here? You say that Michael was not different or special, so stop making him out to be so. You can say that Michael fit the exact profile of a pedophile all you want, but what that takes is to sexualize otherwise thought of non-sexual behavior. Woo! Riley, a PR event that Oprah did spending the night with a whole bunch of girls is a red herring. It is not comparable to a grown man in his sexual prime sharing a bed one-on-one with boys, having multiple allegations, multiple payouts. These are not the same. There's no equivocation here. Now, this idea of her being a woman, if Oprah had a little special girl friend every few years from the ages 8 to 14, and this was going on for a number of years, Oprah had a little girl come out and say Oprah molested me, and Oprah paid out 17 million plus to that little girl, and another little girl came forward and Oprah paid out 2 million plus to that little girl, and then later on another little girl comes out and Oprah goes to trial and she gets off, but there was definitely enough evidence to convict her. And after Oprah dies, 2 little girls come forward to say that they were molested by Oprah, and the police already had suspected those 2 little girls had been molested by Oprah. She's a damn pedophile. End of story. I don't care if it's a woman or a man. I don't care if you're black or you're white or you got vitiligo or you're purple or whatever the hell you are. Don't care. Don't give a crap. This behavior isn't acceptable. End of story. So enough. Don't insult my intelligence with this. You know damn well Oprah having a slumber party with a bunch of girls and cameras is not the same as an old man having one-on-one and feeding him alcohol. And we're finally down to the home stretch. Here we go. You say there might be more to the story about James and his train station inconsistency, but honestly, to me it looks a lot like the reason he hasn't talked about it and hasn't made a public statement about it whatsoever is because he's trying to ignore it and he doesn't want to be confronted about it. Well, you have no idea. And quite frankly, why does he need to bother? And I knew if I just waited on this, something would come to light. And oh, guess what? There's an interview with a photographer who went to Neverland. He tells a story about how Michael Jackson didn't want him to photograph the train station. Why? So he asked why. He asked Michael, why would you not want me to do that? And he says, I don't have the permit for it. So he built that sucker before he got the permit. And they got this guy on tape. And when was the permit finally issued? In 93. So that means the train station was there before they got the permit. Oh, Riley. Really, I'm so sorry. I know you were salivating like a Pavlovian dog over this train station as if that was gonna, destroy the entire narrative completely. Somehow this train station was going to vindicate Michael Jackson, but instead it has blown up in the fan's face like a giant volcano, and I love it. And that's the way it will always be. It will always be that way. Everything you try to do to defend this pedophile will always blow up in your face. Why? Because what you're defending is a lie. And I will be back.